Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really going to crack open this book by Napoleon Hill, How to Own Your Own Mind, and really get into how to think strategically.
Mm.
Not just dream about success, but really like set things in motion.
And what's really striking is that Hill wrote this decades ago, yet these principles about cultivating a success-driven mindset, they're more relevant now than ever, I think, in today's world.
Yeah, it's like he had a crystal ball or something, right? And he starts with this idea of creative vision, which, at first glance, it sounds kind of basic, but Hill says it's about way more than just having, a good idea.
It really is. Hill argues that it's about recognizing those opportunities where other people might just see the everyday, the mundane. Think about the invention of the iPhone, for example.
Right.
That wasn't about some genius conjuring up brand new technology.
It's like they took things that already existed and mashed them up in a really clever way.
Exactly. That's what synthetic imagination is, one of the two main types of imagination that Hill talks about.
Okay, so synthetic imagination.
Yeah.
So that's like what a chef doing something new with ingredients we've all seen before.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you've got this idea of creative imagination, which is a little harder to put your finger on.
Yeah, that sounds way more like mystical or something.
It's more like that spark you see in artists and writers.
Right.
Think of a musician waking up with a melody in their head, or a painter who just sees their next masterpiece.
Right.
They're tapping into something deeper, something beyond just thinking it up,
So how do we do that? Is that something you're just born with?
Ailey was sure that everyone has both types of imagination in them. It's just about recognizing those aha moments and then practicing so you get better at it.
So it's not just like wishing on a star. He actually gives us concrete steps to kind of get those creative juices flowing. And he calls those the 5 principles to spark your imagination. And the one that really spoke to me was this definiteness of purpose idea.
Yeah, that's a big one for Hill. He's all about being laser focused on what you want, not just having this vague idea of success.
So it's like knowing where you want to go before you even type it into your GPS without that you're just driving around aimlessly.
Exactly. And then there's also this idea of teamwork that Hill is a big believer in, the mastermind principle, he calls it. It's about finding your people, the ones who get you, who can challenge you and help you see things from different angles.
And this is where the book brings up the example of this woman, Anna, who's super passionate about animal rescue.
And it's that love for animals that really fuels her creative vision. It could be coming up with new ways to raise money for the shelter, or finding homes for abandoned pets,
Right, so her passion is like the fuel, and Hill's principles are like the roadmap, but having a vision is just part of it, right?
Right. You need to know how to cut through the noise and get your thoughts in order. That's where Hill's idea of organized thinking comes in.
Okay, and this is where things get really interesting, because he compares our minds to cameras were always taking in information. But instead of ending up with a nice photo album, it's more like this jumbled mess of images.
Like when you get sucked into scrolling through bad news online.
Oh my gosh, busted. I am so guilty of that.
But Hill would say that to really make our minds work for us, we have to be pickier about the information we let in.
I do.
We need to figure out what's real and what's just someone's opinion. Check our own biases, and always be on the lookout for good sources.
So it's like being the editor of your own mind, deciding what makes it into the final cut, instead of letting every random thought just take up space.
Exactly. And what's wild is how relevant this is to today's world. It's like he knew how overloaded with information we'd be.
It's true. He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. It's like spring cleaning, but for your brain.
Right. Out with the clutter.
Exactly.
And in with the insights that actually serve you.
Okay, but even with a clear vision and a well-organized mind, there's still this one piece missing, right?
Action. Hill was big on this. You can't just think about it. You got to do the work.
Okay, but that's the hard part.
It is, but he believed that willpower and discipline, those are like muscles. You can strengthen the more you use them, the stronger they get.
So it's like that voice in your head that's like, okay, I know you want to stay in your pajamas, but we got to get this done.
Exactly. It's choosing to act even when it's hard. And that's where willpower comes, in that drive to keep going even when you face setbacks. Hill was all about treating your willpower like a muscle that needs care. He'd say, make sure you're rested, surround yourself with good influences, that kind of thing.
Right. Got to keep that mental gas tank full.
Exactly.
There's also this other concept he talks about, autosuggestion. This is kind of like those positive affirmations everyone's into these days.
Similar idea, but Hill's take on autosuggestion is more about consistently feeding your subconscious those positive messages so you start to actually believe them.
So it's not just like seeing it out loud. It's got to be deeper than that.
Exactly. It's about really feeling it. Hill was even into using visualization, like picturing yourself achieving your goals to make those autosuggestions even more powerful.
So you're basically creating a movie in your mind where you're the star. I love it. But how does this actually work in the real world?
Well, the book gives this example of a guy named Harold. He's facing a tough deadline to make rent, but instead of freaking out, he uses Hill's 5 factors of controlled attention.
Okay, so remind us, what are those 5 factors?
So first you got definiteness of purpose. Harold knows exactly what he needs to do, make rent. Then there's self-discipline. He tells that inner critic to quiet down. He's not going to let negativity take over. Instead, he's using controlled attention to focus all his energy on finding a solution.
So instead of stressing about the problem, he's focusing on fixing it.
Exactly. And this is where autosuggestion comes in. Harold starts brainstorming ways to make money. He's a pretty handy guy, so maybe he can offer some repair services to his neighbors. He's also good at math, so maybe he can tutor.
He's creating opportunities instead of waiting for them to just appear.
Exactly. And the thing that ties it all together is his willpower, that belief that he's going to make it work. Even if he gets a few no's along the way, he keeps going. And Hill actually uses Thomas Edison as another example of this controlled attention in action.
Oh yeah, that makes sense, especially when you think about his famous quote, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work."
Exactly. He just never gave up.
Right.
Edison believed in the power of focus, of shutting out the distractions. He was all about controlled attention and truly believing in yourself and your ability to achieve your goals, no matter how crazy they might seem.
So he was living proof of what Hill was talking about.
Absolutely. And to further illustrate his point, Hill also brings in this other business giant, Andrew Carnegie, to show how controlled attention can lead to success in any field.
Okay, and what was Carnegie's secret?
Carnegie was all about specialization. He was convinced that focusing all your energy on becoming a total expert in one specific area, that's how you rise to the top.
Right, like that saying, "Jack of all trades, master of none." It's great to have different skills,
Yeah.
but there's something to be said for being amazing at one thing.
Exactly. But that brings up an interesting question. What about those fields that need you to know a little bit of everything?
Right, like how does that work?
Hill uses the example of retail merchandising, which often involves managing different departments with different specializations.
Okay, so how do you reconcile those two things? Having specialized knowledge, but also this broader understanding of the whole field.
It's not about picking one or the other. Even in those more diverse roles, controlled attention is key. Think about it. In retail, you have a general manager who oversees everything. But then within that, you've got separate departments, clothing, electronics, sporting goods, each with its own expertise.
So there's still specialization, just on a smaller scale.
Exactly. The manager of the clothing department needs to be up on all the latest fashion trends, fabrics, what customers are looking for. The sporting goods manager needs to know everything about equipment brands. The latest athletic trends, their controlled attention is honed in on excelling in their specific area, which then contributes to the overall success of the business.
So it's like finding your own personal zone of genius within a larger system. That makes a lot of sense. But what about those of us who are still trying to figure out our major purpose? That one thing we really want to specialize in. Does Hill have any advice for us while we're still searching?
He does. He actually spends a good chunk of the book talking about this very thing. He tells the story of Claire, who's in college and totally lost about what she wants to do with her life. She starts by exploring different options, taking classes outside her major, even trying out a few part-time jobs.
So she's letting herself explore and experiment, which is great.
Exactly. And through all this exploration, Claire starts to get a better sense of her strengths, what she's passionate about, what really lights her up. And eventually she realizes that she wants to be a doctor, even though that wasn't even on her radar at first.
So even though she spent time focusing on other things, it wasn't wasted time.
Not at all. Hill really stresses this point. Even if you switch gears or totally change paths, those skills you picked up along the way, communication, critical thinking, self-discipline, those are always going to be valuable.
It's about trusting the journey, even when there are detours or things don't go as planned.
Exactly. And often those detours lead you to something even better than you could have imagined.
Right, like that quote, "Sometimes you find your path by getting lost."
And in Claire's case, once she figures out her major purpose, becoming a doctor, everything else just clicks into
It's like
place.
all the pieces of the puzzle finally come together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is like all those different experiences, even the ones that seem totally random at the time, they all come together to kind of create this bigger picture.
Exactly. And, this whole idea of a major purpose, it ties back to what we were saying about autosuggestion. When you're living in alignment with your purpose, your subconscious mind, it becomes this powerful ally helping you achieve those goals. It's like your whole being is on board with the
Right,
plan.
no more self-sabotage. It's like effortless.
Exactly. The right opportunities seem to just show up. You handle obstacles better, and you feel this deep sense of satisfaction because you're living in line with your values.
Okay, so taking a step back and looking at everything we've talked about today, it's really like Hill gave us this roadmap for our minds, this guidebook we never knew we needed. It's pretty amazing when you think about it that we have the power to actually train our minds for success.
It really is. And the thing is, his ideas are more relevant now than ever. We're
Yeah.
constantly bombarded with information and distractions. So these concepts of controlled attention, organized thinking, finding your major purpose, they're like essential skills for navigating the modern world.
He was like the original life coach, but for your mind, it's like he knew exactly what we'd be dealing with.
He did. And more importantly, he gave us the tools to not just survive, but to really thrive.
Absolutely. He reminds us that we're not just along for the ride. We have the power to choose what we focus on, how we think, how we react to challenges.
Right. It's all about taking control of your own mind.
And by doing that, by developing these mental muscles, we can unlock our full potential and create a life that's truly fulfilling.
I love that. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as you continue on with Hill's book, How to Own Your Own Mind, think about this. What's one controlled habit, one small change you can make this week to really sharpen your focus and boost your productivity? What's one step you can take today, no matter how small, to move you closer to your major purpose? Eve thinks you're still figuring out exactly what that looks like.
It's all about taking those small steps, building that momentum.
Exactly. And as Napoleon Hill would say, every journey, no matter how big or how small, starts with a single step. Thanks for diving deep with us today.